We've all seen movies like The Matrix, films that make you question whether or not we're living in a world controlled by a more advanced civilization, or at least one in an alternate universe, which of course leads to more questions like, do I have free will? We typically move on having convinced ourselves it isn't possible.
But an assistant professor of philosophy at Nanyang Technology University in Singapore says quite the opposite. He argues if you believe that one day our lives could be run by simulations, then we are most likely already in one. Here to tell us if any of this is possible or likely what the arguments are is friend of the show, Dr. Joseph Pesce. He's an astrophysicist at the National Science Foundation. Great to see you, sir.
Thank you. Nice seeing you.
Okay, so there's a New York Times op-ed. It kind of blew my mind, and I was like, I got to talk to Dr. Joe about this. So the whole argument, one that Elon Musk apparently buys into, by the way, is that if we believe that we will eventually be able to create AI and technology so sophisticated that you can essentially replicate human beings and run these kind of sophisticated simulations, then it is most likely that some advanced civilization has already created that simulation and we are actually that simulation.
Yes.
That's the argument. What do you think about it?
Maybe I'm the simulated one, and you're real. I don't know.
Anything is possible.
Yes, that is the argument, and even more so. We run simulations all the time to understand the world around us. Physicists, astronomers, economists, political scientists.
Right.
So run these simulations. They're of varying quality, and they help us understand the observables, the observations that we make. And so yes, the thought is in distant future or different civilization or whatever that's significantly advanced, you can run simulations that are highly sophisticated. And then there's the possibility that we are in fact in a simulation.
In one of those simulations?
Yes.
My mind is just blown. Like, how would you even know if you're in a simulation or not?
Well, that's a great question.
That is a great question. And so this gets in the realm of, is this really science or is it philosophical thought?
Right.
Right. And so
that's a deep question.
It's a very deep question, and there are some people that are looking at ways of testing this. Right. So no matter how sophisticated the simulation is, there may be glitches. So they're simulating the laws of gravity, but they're not perfect. And so if we detect glitches in the laws of gravity, maybe that's an indication that it's a simulation. On the other hand, how would you know whether that's a simulation glitch or
something
that we don't understand? That's right. So in fact, the question is this really a testable question? In which case, if it's not, then it's not science.
Right.
Right, because science requires testing.
Interesting. So one of the other arguments that's made for this, which I'm going to need your assistance in properly making, but in a video game, if you can think of the video game like a simulation, you're only creating the parts that the user's going to be able to see, right?
Yes.
And in our own world, right, the way that we sort of perceive things is very different from when you break it down to the sort of tiniest particles, and this whole idea that you can only know where they are if they are actually being observed. And if they're not being observed, they're anywhere, they're nowhere.
Yes.
We don't really know, which sort of corresponds with this idea that only the parts of the simulation that we are observing are actually being created.
Yes, so you're talking about quantum mechanics, right? That we don't necessarily know where an electron is or how fast it's moving, but once we make the measurement, then that all comes together and we can know where it is, but we don't know how fast it's moving, for example. We talked about this last time with time travel, right?
Right.
So yes, that appears to be the way the universe works, and you could say then that everything we're experiencing is part of a simulation. But again, how do we test that? And so yes, it could be, but
well, it's the Schrodinger's cat thing,
sure,
right?
Of course, yes.
So explain to our audience what that is and that whole concept. At
the quantum mechanical level, you can't know everything about a quantum mechanical particle, say an electron. We might want to know how fast it's moving and its location. In things in the macro world, we know my hands are moving and they're at this location. But at the quantum mechanical world, we can only make a measurement of one of those elements. Once we measure one of them, the location, we don't know how fast it's moving. Or if we measure how fast it's moving, we don't necessarily know its location. It's all about probability, because there's a probability of movement, there's a probability of location, and once we measure one of those and determine that the probability is 100% for it to be in this location, we still have the probability of the speed of the object that we can't measure necessarily. And so that's at the quantum mechanical level. I don't know if that comes into play in simulations, if we are a simulation.
Right.
But to your point that, well, we are in a simulation and that what we're observing around us is part of the simulation and there's nothing outside of that. If we try to measure outside of it, we can't measure that. Well, maybe, perhaps. But I want something that's testable to say whether we are in a simulation or not.
So if we are in a simulation, do we want to know that we're in a simulation?
Well, this is a very good question, and this is the professor that you mentioned earlier brings up the point that probably we don't want to know.
It's probably better just to
Yeah,
keep doing our thing.
Ignorance is bliss thing.
And so you can think, well, psychologically we don't want to know because that would be horrible if we realize we're in a simulation.
Right.
His hypothesis is that if we now all of a sudden realize that we're in a simulation, the entities that are creating the simulation say, well, our experiment has been ruined, let's turn the simulation off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
so
not
his
good.
point is,
don't
ask questions.
So we're going to stop asking questions on that and transition to there may be a black hole neutron star merger. Tell us what that is, what that means, what people are saying.
Okay, very good. So this gets into the concept of gravitational waves.
Okay.
And gravitational waves have been a thing since Einstein, the theory of relativity in 1916, but they were first detected in 2014.
Wow.
Mere 5 years ago.
It's unbelievable.
Yes, exactly. And so, people hadn't thought about gravitational waves, and now it's everywhere. And in fact, these detectors that we have, the main observatory in the US is the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, L-I-G-O, LIGO. And LIGO is a very sensitive instrument, and there are a few others around the world. The Europeans have one called Virgo. LIGO is a very sensitive instrument because gravitational waves are very difficult to detect. So what are gravitational waves? Well, masses that move, my arms, for example, are generating gravitational waves that go off into space-time, and the gravitational wave compresses and stretches space-time as it moves through the universe at the speed of light. Big masses and violent motions cause very strong in a relative sense, gravitational waves. And so these are the sorts of things that we can detect now.
Gotcha.
Black holes that are collapsing into each other, for example, or in this case, and here's a video of a simulation of two black holes orbiting each other that will coalesce and send out a burst of gravitational waves.
Gotcha.
So at the moment, we can only detect these big, extreme regions of space, extreme gravitational regions of space that produce gravitational waves, because the gravitational waves are very weak. How weak? They are about 1,000 times smaller. The fluctuations in space-time are 1,000 times smaller than the size of the atomic nucleus.
Wow.
So those little waves are traveling through space. We need exquisitely precise instruments to be able to detect these, and that's what the LIGO observatory does.
Gotcha.
And so, since it's turned on and since the first detection in 2014, there have been about a dozen gravitational wave detections, and they're mostly black hole mergers. We've seen a couple of years ago there was a neutron star merger. And now, a couple of weeks ago, on the 14th of August, there appears to have been a merger between a black hole and a neutron star. That is, the black hole absorbed an orbiting neutron star. And this would be the first time that was detected.
So that's the first time it's detected.
Yes.
What is the significance of that? I mean, what happens? What do we know about what happens when that occurs?
Well, certainly if it's a black hole merger or black hole anything else, the two black holes or the black hole and the neutron star merge, and you're left with a more massive black hole in the end. So a neutron star falling into a black hole, you have a black hole that has absorbed the mass of the neutron star. Or another black hole companion, and the mass increases, but there's a single black hole in the end, right? So two of them orbiting each other, they absorb, and then you have a bigger black hole.
So then is the Earth going to fall into a black hole if all the black holes keep combining?
So this is an excellent question, and one that I get all the time, because people are fascinated by black holes, but afraid that this will happen.
We're either in a simulation that's getting the plug pulled, or we're falling into a black hole.
That's how the simulation's going to end.
Well, maybe. But so to put it into perspective, the black hole has a lot of mass, or can have a lot of mass, but it has very small size. So if our sun became a black hole right now, which it can't, by the way. There's no physical way for our sun to become a black hole. But a black hole of the size of our sun would be just about the size of the Earth in diameter. So very, very small. But it would have the mass of the sun. And it would be sitting there in the middle of the solar system. Now, we wouldn't get light and heat from it anymore because it's a black hole, but it still has the mass. And so we would continue orbiting around the black hole. But it's very, very small down there in the middle of the solar system, right? So gravity is strong for us as humans, but it's really a very weak universal force. It's of the 4 forces in the universe, gravity is the weakest. And so the gravitational field drops off very rapidly with distance. And so even though the Earth, as it orbits the sun that's now a black hole, feels the mass of the black hole, we are not attracted to it.
You're not going to be pulled into it unless we're a lot closer.
Unless we're very, very close.
Gotcha. What are the 4 forces of the...
The strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetic force that operates on photons and how light is transmitted, and then the gravitational force.
There you go. Dr. Joe, making it all plain. Thank you. Great to see you. We always love when you stop by.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Coming up, we have some breaking news. David Koch, one of course, the Koch brothers, has passed away, and a new book is out about both David Koch and his brother, Charles. Fascinating read. My conversation with Christopher Leonard is next.
Leonard digs into what he learned about the brothers' political and social influence in his book, Kochland, The Secret History of Koch Industries and Corporate Power in America. That When Rising continues.